This is Ahval Online, meeting point of accurate news and free comment on the current affairs of Turkey. Welcome to our podcast series.
Hello, dear Ahval audience. I'm Gülten Sarı. Today, we will talk about current economic crisis in Turkey. As you follow from the social media, Turkish lira plummets to historic low. Turkish lira dropped to another record low of, let's say, the 12.50 to the dollar. So we are facing a serious economic crisis. And also, we will discuss what's going on with the US in terms of bargain of F-16 fighter jets. As you know, Turkey and the US are discussing on this for a while, and Turkey was excluded from F-35 fighter jets project totally. And another issue that we will talk today is Syria, Turkey's possible Syria military intervention or operation, whether it's possible or not, whether the US or Russia will allow Turkey to carry out this operation. Of course, I have a guest, Senior Director of the Turkey program at the Foundation for Defence of Democracies, Aykan Erdemir. Mr. Erdemir, welcome to our program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for accepting us. First of all, let's start with dollar and the economic crisis in Turkey. How do you see the situation from the US? And do you think that the government will apply to IMF for money to kind of save the economy? And what will be possible answer of IMF to the Turkish government's possible demand? What are you thinking?
Now, this is a train crash that has long been in the making. Hence, people refer to it as kind of a slow motion train crash. That is, Erdoğan has for long adhered to an unorthodox economic view that higher inflation is caused by high interest rates. Hence, he has been experimenting with an Islamist-based economic model, which basically is all about waging war against the policy rate in Turkey. And as I have predicted in a 2018 article I wrote for the foreign policy, this was bound to bring this week's catastrophic collapse. So Turkish lira has lost over 40% of its value year to date. And this is simply the latest episode of an ongoing devaluation in Turkey, which actually started under the leadership of Erdoğan's son-in-law, Berat Albayrak, who used to be the Minister of Finance and Treasury. So at this point, as Turkey has come close to depleting its foreign currency reserves, as the Turkish lira hits a historic low, and as Turkey's capital flight continue, what options does the Erdoğan government have? Normally, when we take a look at similar emerging markets, such as Argentina, we know that they turn to the IMF, International Monetary Fund, for a bailout package. So this could be a standby agreement or an extended fund facility. But in the Turkish case, again, as I predicted in a 2020 article in another foreign policy piece, Erdoğan is not likely to turn to the IMF. Again, he has built his economic program on a rejection of the IMF. And at the same time, he would not like the strings attached that come with such programs, such bailout programs, because almost always a bailout program would require transparency, accountability, the rule of law, as well as a kind of a more prudent economic management, which are at this point not necessarily on the menu for Erdoğan or his senior aides.
Mm-hmm. And what about this F-16 fighter jets bargain between two countries? How is going on there?
Now that continues to be a complex negotiation process on which there are reasons not to be too optimistic. On the one hand, CAATSA sanctions that President Trump introduced against Turkey during his last month in office, after being pressured by Congress, are still in effect. So Turkey's presidency of defense industries is still a sanctioned entity and is not able to procure a major military purchase from the United States. At the same time, for over 2 years, there has been an informal ban, an informal block at the US Congress against any major arms purchases for Turkey. This results from the bipartisan sentiment in both chambers of the US Congress, and is actually led by some of the most senior names in, for example, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. So I don't see any hopes in the short run for that informal block to be lifted as well. Adding to that, Erdogan's threats to purchase a second battery of the S-400 air defense system, as well as Russian jets, are not helping his case. Because even if some pro-Turkey voices would like to encourage the sale of the F-16s, saying that this is the best strategy against Turkey from further pivoting to Russia, Erdogan's threats to turn to Russia undermine this argument, undermine this position, making policymakers even more skeptical about the future course of Ankara. So at this point, we only have President Biden's, let's say, encouraging words, which do not necessarily translate into a policy shift in Washington. Let's keep in mind that President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris both suffer from extremely low popularity rates, approval rates in the United States, and they have little political capital to spend on Erdogan's F-16 bid. So if Erdogan is counting on the White House, I again don't see much hope there of the Biden administration taking a risk for an Erdogan who has time and again acted in erratic and unpredictable ways.
Let's talk about a bit the Syria issue. As I reminded our audience that Turkey was planning a kind of military operation to Syria. However, there were claims in the media that Russia and the US both didn't approve this operation, so Turkey had to stop. It was kind of seen as kind of, election card for a preparation for 2023 elections, but it seems that it also failed. What are you thinking on this?
I think here Turkey, or more specifically the Erdogan government, is between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, Turkey's economic collapse, ongoing economic collapse, necessitate Erdogan to deflect the electorate's attention away from the misery, the suffering, the poverty at home. And there is nothing better than a cross-border operation, especially targeting of the Syrian Kurdish led Syrian Democratic Forces for a rally around the flag effect in an increasingly nationalistic Turkey. But at the same time, Erdogan is under immense pressure, not only from the United States, but also from Russia. When it comes to the United States, the Biden administration renewed the executive order, introducing sanctions against the Erdogan government for its third cross-border operation into Syria, which was introduced by the Trump administration. So now we have the same sanctions language in place by the Biden administration. And beyond the executive branch, there is almost unanimous consensus in both chambers of the US Congress against such an operation. So Erdogan is extremely alone in Washington when it comes to his ambitions for Syria. But then when it comes to Russia, things are even more serious because Putin has proven himself not only to be a tough negotiator, but as opposed to the United States as someone who carries out a hard pushback if and when necessary. So although the United States turns to sanctions for the most part, for sticks against Turkey, Russia can turn to use of hard power, including, for example, bombing of Turkish forces in the Idlib region. So given the close relationship between Putin and Erdoğan, I don't think the Turkish president has much room to maneuver, especially when it comes to Russia. So this is what I meant by Erdoğan being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yes, he has a lot of reasons why he should look for an operation into northern Syria, but at the same time, he really has no room to maneuver given the pressure from Russia and the United States, as well as, the budgetary constraints back at home.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for helping us to understand what's going on between the US and Turkey and the relation between two countries. Let me remind our audience that this program will be limited to 12 minutes. In fact, it's with Aykan Erdemir, of course, from Washington, D.C. And next week, we will continue to discuss other aspects of the US and Turkish relations. Thank you very much for joining us and explaining the relations between the two countries.
It was a great pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you.
You can follow Ahval News Online podcast series through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, and Spreaker. All you need to know about Turkey is here for your ears, mind, and attention. Thank you for listening to our podcast.